Hey everyone, it's Alex, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. If you'd like to support this content, hitting the like button is the best thing you can do. It's absolutely free and helps tremendously with this content. With that being said, let's start with deck number 10, which is going to be a Silky Smooth Black Athena-based deck. Now you're going to notice there's not as much Silky in here, just a couple little activators, but it is running a 55% win rate and a strong cube rate at 0.32, 2,000 games played. What you're running is the Black Bolt Stature combination with Silk and Miles Morales. You are getting a lot of value from Miles Morales. This is worth knowing that the Black Widow is very effective at kind of disrupting the Loki decks that we're seeing some experimentation with. Loki's main benefit is going to be drawing into a lot of the cards that have the Loki effect applied, and Black Widow is going to negate that to some degree. Enchantress is doing good work in the current meta because Enchantress does a good job of counteracting a lot of the ongoing pieces we're seeing in a lot of decks, including Patriot, which we'll talk about shortly. You're also seeing straight up Zoo and Kazar and Blue Marvel. So she does represent a very good answer in the current meta, and Shang-Chi's always a good answer. This deck features a lot of interesting tech while also providing a lot of discounted synergies, whether it be through the Silk and Miles Morales, the Nocturne Miles Morales, and of course the Black Bolt Stature. It's also currently running the Korg and Darkhawk synergy. It's also worth noting that the Black Widow also supports Darkhawk. However, it does not have the effectiveness of, say, a Rock Slide for buffing the Darkhawk by additional 2 power for the additional Rock. What the Black Widow does is have the negative impact on Loki while also providing 2 additional power to the Darkhawk by preventing a draw on that turn. So you could go Rock Slide instead of something like Black Widow, but in the current meta right now, Black Widow represents a very good choice. That takes us to number 9, and it's Helicarrier Discard. We saw a buff to the Apocalypse, which is nice because, I mean, this deck, although it was running near the top of the meta for the longest time, it really fell off after a couple significant nerfs, especially the one to Apocalypse. And although the meta has shifted significantly, a 56% win rate in 0.29 cube rate at 290 games is pretty decent. We tend to like cube rates that are a little higher. However, this is still pretty good. You're going to be able to get that Morbius pretty damn high. Morbius loves the idea of discarding a Helicarrier into something like a MODOK, and of course your Dracula combination play with the Apocalypse. Overall, it's doing pretty good, although I think there's room for improvement. Discard has definitely fallen off, and you are going to see a higher, well, pretty much many of the decks we're going to be talking today do have higher cube rates, which of course is really important in a game like Marvel Snap, where Snap Equity is essential to your progression through the ranks. So that's number 9, Helicarrier Discard. It's cool to have it back. Number 8 is Patriot, and this isn't the last deck we're going to be talking about that features Sandman in today's video. Sandman's definitely making a bit of a comeback here. What's notable about this deck is it features a lot of interesting tech. You do have the Cassandra Nova for the Airstream gamers out there, but then you just have really good stuff like Sandman, which completely shuts down any combo-based deck. We are seeing a number of Surfer-based decks running Sarah once again in the meta, so this is going to be a major counterplay to that. But you are seeing the Brood, Absorbing Man, and Iron Lad combination, which has traditionally been very, very strong. And honestly, don't underestimate what a Wasp under the influence of a Patriot and a Blue Marvel can do. This deck does not run a Kazar, but it runs a lot of interesting tech for the current meta, including Cassandra Nova and Sandman. So I really like how this is positioned from an all-around tech and attack offensively standpoint. The deck seems to have a lot of things going for it and can kind of deal with the meta very effectively right now. And while we're seeing a lot of shifting in the meta, there's no question that at a 57% win rate and a 0.31 cube rate, we have good enough stats to warrant the inclusion on this list. But most importantly, Patriot is starting to see a little bit of experimentation, which is nice to see because traditionally Patriot is just, it hasn't been keeping up with the times. Where Patriot hasn't been getting many additional tools, especially with the nerf to the Mockingbird. To number 7 we go, and we do have Zoo. This is running tremendous stats. Now, this version of Zoo in the current meta, it's only running a 180 game sample size. But in those 180 games, we have a 57% win rate and a fantastic 0.46 cube rate. And quite frankly, there's nothing crazy here, right? It's a Gilgamesh Zoo deck with Mockingbird. This is nearly identical to what was the top tier base decks when Gilgamesh first got buffed. And you do have Kyra being teched in because the prevalence of Destroy. Destroy is occupying a very large meta share again. From a win rate perspective, it's very middle of the pack, right? However, it's consistent, but Kyra is having to be teched in. You do have, of course, Shadow King, which is phenomenal against Destroy and some other, decks, especially particularly those that might run something like a Blob. But, I mean, if you've been playing any Zoo at all over the last little while, you know that these decks are surprisingly effective, and this one's going to be no different. It does have a small sample size, but it is a tried, tested, and true Gilgamesh-based formula deck that has shown that it is capable of winning games of Snap. That takes us to a number 6, and it is Erisham. Now, Erisham has obviously been impacted by a couple of the nerfs in the OTAs, namely to that of Blob. So why not just not include Blob? And of course, Loki's interesting because Loki was obviously changed significantly in the patch, now basically discounting cards in the deck that you're drawing into. And so that hand generation Loki-based Erisham deck, which was pretty much the top of and cream of the crop on the last prior weeks, is no longer at play here. Instead, what you have is a lot of good stuff based kind of like cards that will take advantage of the additional energy being provided by Erisham, while also giving you a chance to say Loki if you so desire. The play pattern takes a little bit of practice because you're generally like in the old Loki days, you would be like piling your hand up with cards, but like it's a very different approach now. I love the inclusion of Black Cat. It does still have some hand generation in the form of Agent Coulson, but ultimately you're going to be relying on the cards you're getting with that additional energy and what you can put down and kind of out-tempo your opponent early on. At a 47 cube rate and a 57% win rate at 840 games, this Loki Erisham deck is performing pretty well, although I do expect there to be quite a bit of refinement over time to Loki Erisham, but the two archetypes seem like they're kind of married together once again. Coming in at number 5, we have Iron Athena. This is a deck that's been one of my absolute favorites for the longest time. I've been championing the Ravonna Renslayer, Mystique Iron Man combination. Now, this deck does have some challenges. It is namely very, very good against the Erisham-based packages, but Erisham is seeing a rapid drop-off in popularity, and so in other matchups, you are going to have to rely on Korgan Rockslide to generate value for your Darkhawk. A lot on turn 6s just might be, Mystique and Iron Man coming down in tandem while giving +3 to your Athena. There's a lot of ways to reach with this deck, and Iron Man and Mystique allow for that with Ravonna Renslayer on the board. Regardless, a very well-designed deck, one that's running both Athena, Angela, and of course the Kitty Pryde, which benefits this deck tremendously as it tries to keep additional power constantly being generated regardless of where you're playing your cards, thanks to Athena, thanks to the vertical reach potential of something like a Sage, and of course the surprise factor of discounted Iron Man and Mystiques. Mystique can be copying Iron Man, can be copying Darkhawk, a lot of different options depending on the game situation. 58% win rate, 0.39 cube rate at 210 games played. That takes us to number 4, and we've been seeing a lot of experimentation with Silver Surfer lately. 58% win rate, 0.46 cube rate at 630 games. It's a pretty good sample size for a deck that has been constantly shifting over the last week or two, and you are seeing the inclusion of Cassandra Nova still. You are getting Copycat, which honestly is just tremendous. Nocturne is just straight up good value. You do have the Brood Absorbing Man combination as well, but you got Gwenpool being added here, which is interesting, and Sarah making it back in. We were seeing some decks running without Sarah with Silver Surfer, trying to generate some momentum on turn 5 and close it out with turn 6, but now you give up a little bit of that turn 5 momentum for the explosive turn 6 plays. Just be very cognizant of what the meta looks like around the Sandman based tech that's occurring much more frequently, and again we will be talking more about Sandman despite the fact that one of our decks already features Sandman as well. So as you can see, the card is on the rise, as are the decks with the win rates and the cube rates. This one's faring pretty good, and I love me some Silver Surfer. That takes us to the next one. We're in the top 3, and Athena Hawk continues to be a great option. Cosmo being teched in here. We are seeing some versions of, this type of deck running Ravonna. I tend to like the Ravonna-based versions, but you cannot, you can't just walk away from stats here. 59% win rate, 60 cube rate, which is through the roof phenomenal at 270 games, which is a little bit of a lower sample size than I would like for something this high on the list. but you are getting a lot of decent tech with something like a Cosmo. It helps protect Athena from Shadow King. It helps protect Darkhawk from Shang-Chi, from Enchantress and others. Once again, you have the Korg Rock Slide for matchups that are not against Airsham. They benefit Cassandra Nova while also benefiting the Darkhawk itself. And you have Kitty Pryde that enables a lot of these combination plays with Athena and Angela. So the deck is really well rounded for the current meta, and I feel like it can kind of roll with the punches and do everything that it needs to do. That takes us to the top 2, and as we reach for hand generation Airsham, it's very much worth noting that although this has a 60% win rate, it is running a 0.37 cube rate, which is good, but we've talked about a couple decks that are kind of outperforming that. But it's running a 210 game sample. You are seeing a wild reduction in the play of Airsham. However, this deck has a lot of the nerfed repeat offenders. It's still running Leech. It's still running Dr. Octopus. It's still running Blob, and they're still performing very well. I like the idea of using Nick Fury, Agent Coulson, Cable to generate some value for, kind of generating anything that you can play down and kind of take advantage of your Quinjet, the discount there, the extra energy from Airsham. Maybe you sneak out an early Professor X from something like Agent Coulson. Who knows? The world is your oyster, as they like to say, when you're running cards like this. Nick Fury generating kind of a large hand that you can kind of play down early and often. It's notable, though, that Loki's not present. The change to Loki has knocked it out of this style of deck. So we're going to see a lot of different changes to Airsham. I still think the card is ultimately good, but I do think that Dr. Octopus, Blob, and of course Leech needed to get looked at, so it was surprising for me to see this deck performing as well as it is. That takes us to the number 1 deck of the week, and I almost couldn't believe it. I got a screenshot here for those that are interested in seeing the proof. A 67% win rate, 0.78 cube rate, one of the highest I've ever seen at 260 games played. So once again, we have a relatively low sample size. I would like to see more. However, it's crazy, absolutely crazy what we're seeing here with Sandman, Ultron, Red Hulk. Of course, you got the copycat Makari making this deck here, and Makari valuable because it's just putting a presence on the board while allowing Sandman to do its thing. Captain Marvel, which is very responsive to the game state after a Sandman-based play. This one does not run the Doctor Doom package, but would rather run Red Hulk. You have Ultron for that reach, Claw for the surprise factor, right? I absolutely love Claw. And it's surprising to see Sandman at the top win rate here, but we're seeing a major flux in the meta right now. Things are changing rather rapidly, and so, hey, things are going to change again next week. So stay tuned, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. I hope this video helped you get started, kind of like navigating the new waters of the new meta, and we'll see you on that next Marvel Snap video.